Good evening. We will now begin the webinar. Today is October 5th, 2021, and the time is 6:01 p.m. This webinar is being live casted and recorded and will be available publicly on the MTA YouTube channel and the Central Business District Tolling Program project website at new.mta.info/project/CBDTP. By attending this virtual webinar, you are consenting to be recorded. Today's webinar will begin with opening remarks, followed by a presentation on the Central Business District Tolling Program, and then public comments. Only those who signed up to speak in advance will be able to give public comments. If you have joined the Zoom under a name that is different from the one you used when you signed up to speak, please identify yourself in the Q&A function with the name you used when you signed up. If you did not sign up to speak at today's webinar, you may sign up to speak at an upcoming webinar. To do so, please visit new.mta.info/project/CBDTP or call the public meeting hotline at 646-252-6777. Anyone who joined the Zoom may also use the Q&A function throughout today's webinar to ask questions or provide comments. CART captioning and American Sign Language interpreters are available at today's webinar. We will now start with opening remarks from Dr. Allison Desereno, MTA's Deputy Chief Operating Officer.
Thank you. And thank you all for joining us this evening. We're excited to be engaging in public outreach for this historic project, and we thank you for taking the time to learn more and share with us your thoughts and comments. Joining me today are colleagues from New York State Department of Transportation and New York City Department of Transportation, as well as from the Federal Highway Administration, the lead federal agency for the project. We also have several individuals from our respective staffs here with us to listen to what you have to say. Your comments will be indexed and considered as part of the environmental assessment process. So with that, let's jump right in, as there's a lot to cover. Our agenda for today is to review the proposed program, the project purpose and need, discuss the project alternatives, provide an overview of the environmental assessment, and discuss and describe environmental justice considerations. We'll take a few moments to talk about the potential project effects and benefits, and then have a public comment session. So how did we get here? There's been a decade of congestion. Congestion in New York City has consistently ranked among the worst in the United States. Local bus speeds in Manhattan are on average 7% slower than citywide speeds. Between 2010 and 2018, travel speeds decreased by 23% in Manhattan's Central Business District, or CBD. And during that same period, multiple studies and panels explored how best to address congestion, including the 2008 New York City Traffic Congestion Mitigation Commission and the 2018 Fix New York City Advisory Panel. Many of them came back with the same concept of congestion pricing. There is also a need for sustainable funding source for transit. Prior to the pandemic, nearly 75% of trips into the Manhattan Central Business District were made using transit. 95% of trips to the Manhattan Central Business District by low-income populations are made using transit. MTA's subway system is over 100 years old and must be repaired and modernized to meet the region's needs. And funding transit modernization would improve service and attract commuters back to the system, further reducing congestion. In April 2019, the New York State Legislature passed the MTA Reform and Traffic Mobility Act. If approved by the Federal Highway Administration, this act would entail vehicles entering or remaining in the Manhattan Central Business District be tolled. Net revenues would be used for public transportation capital projects, with 80% devoted to New York City Transit, 10% to the Long Island Railroad, and 10% to Metro North. The toll rates will be determined by the Triborough Bridge and Tunnel Authority, or TBTA Board, informed by recommendations of the Traffic Mobility Review Board and after a public hearing. There are mandatory post-implementation reporting and evaluation requirements. To make sure everyone understands the area about which we're speaking, Central Business District tolling program boundary is south of and inclusive of 60th Street. Tolls would not apply to vehicles that are solely using the FDR Drive, Route 9A West Side Highway, including connections to the Hugh L. Carey Tunnel, or the Battery Park Underpass connecting the FDR Drive and Route 9A. The Federal Highway Administration will serve as the federal lead agency for the environmental review. They're responsible for reviewing all of our analyses to confirm that they are complete, and they will also issue the environmental findings for the project. The Metropolitan Transportation Authority and its affiliate, the Triborough Bridge and Tunnel Authority, the New York State Department of Transportation, and the New York City Department of Transportation are serving as project sponsors. With respect to the project purpose and need, the project purpose is to reduce traffic congestion in the Manhattan Central Business District in a manner that will generate revenue for future transportation improvements, pursuant to acceptance into the FHWA's Value Pricing Pilot Program, or VPPP. The project would address the following needs: reduce vehicle congestion in the Manhattan Central Business District, and create a new local recurring funding source for MTA's capital projects. The following objectives further refine the project purpose. It would reduce daily vehicle miles traveled, or VMT, within the Manhattan Central Business District, reduce the number of vehicles entering the Manhattan Central Business District each day, create a funding source for capital improvements, and generate sufficient annual net revenue to fund $15 billion for capital projects for the MTA capital program, and establish a tolling program consistent with the purposes underlying the New York State legislation entitled the MTA Reform and Traffic Mobility Act. So how is the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, and the project linked? NEPA requires federal agencies to assess and consider the environmental effects of their proposed actions prior to making a decision. The project would be implemented through the Federal Highway Administration's VPPP. As a federal program, that VPPP, or Value Pricing Pilot Program, is subject to NEPA. Federal Highway Administration is the lead agency and has determined that an environmental assessment with extensive outreach is the appropriate level of environmental documentation for this project. There are two project alternatives. There's the no action. There would be no Central Business District tolling program, no comprehensive plan to reduce congestion in the Central Business District, and no identified transit capital revenue stream. And there is the build or act alternative, where we would build a Central Business District tolling program. There would be new tolling infrastructure and toll system equipment, implementation of a tolling program, which would have multiple scenarios in the environmental assessment to assess and identify the range of effects, positive or negative. And there would be creation of a new revenue stream for investment in subways, buses, and rail. A little more detail on the proposed Central Business District tolling program alternative. As noted earlier, tolls would be charged for vehicles entering Manhattan south of and inclusive of 60th Street. Passenger vehicles would be charged once per day, and there are exemptions required by the MTA Reform and Traffic Mobility Act for qualifying vehicles transporting persons with disabilities, qualifying authorized emergency vehicles. Central Business District residents with gross adjusted incomes below $60,000 would be eligible for a tax credit. And there would be a Traffic Mobility Review Board that would be tasked with recommending to the TBTA board the toll structure, including but not limited to a plan for credits, discounts, and/or exemptions. Recommendations will be informed by a traffic study and must take into account multiple criteria, including the ability to generate revenue required, the impact on traffic patterns and volumes, public safety, air quality, among others. With respect to the toll, the environmental assessment is going to assess a range of scenarios and will be informed by robust public outreach. Studying multiple scenarios ensures that we understand the full range of potential environmental effects, including but not limited to congestion reduction, that different toll rates may cause. Toll rates will differ in each scenario depending upon the time of day, how someone pays, and the inclusion and extent of any credits, discounts, and/or exemptions beyond the two mandated by the enabling state legislation. Importantly, all else being equal, the more credits, discounts, and/or exemptions that are given, the higher the toll must be in order to meet the project's purpose, needs, and objectives. The modeling is not complete, and a final determination of the toll rates will not be made in the environmental assessment. Indeed, the toll rates, as noted previously, will ultimately be set by a vote of the TBTA board after the environmental review process and after the Traffic Mobility Review Board makes its recommendations. So importantly, these numbers I am about to share are for informational purposes and subject to change. With that said, to give you at least a sense of the range of potential toll rates, we anticipate that the Easy Pass peak period toll for automobiles will range from roughly $9 on the lower end to $23 on the higher end if many credits, exemptions, and/or discounts are provided. The range of potential toll rates for automobiles using tolls by mail would be higher, roughly $14 to $35 for the peak period, again, depending upon scenario. Off-peak and overnight toll ranges may be lower, and tolls for trucks and other vehicle types would have different ranges. With respect to the study areas, The broad study area for the environmental assessment includes a region of 28 counties throughout New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. There will also be more refined local study areas, including the Central Business District as defined by the MTA Reform and Traffic Mobility Act. In other words, 60th Street and Inclusive and South, with those other areas excluded as we described earlier. And neighborhoods near the Central Business District boundary where the project could have social, economic, or environmental effects. In terms of the key topics of the environmental assessment, this is not the full list, but we wanted to at least give you some sense of the kinds of things we'll be studying. Among them, as you can see, regional transportation, which is obvious. We'll be looking at highways and local intersections, commuter rail, subways, and buses, parking, and pedestrian and bicyclists. We'll also be looking at social and economic considerations and conditions. We'll be looking at the visual resources, air quality, noise, and environmental justice, among others. Environmental justice is an important consideration for the project. Given that over 51% of the population within our study area lives in environmental justice communities, we're going to spend some time walking you through the federal requirements to address environmental justice and some of the tools we'll be using to engage with environmental justice communities. The term environmental justice refers collectively to minority and low-income populations within a project study area. In 1994, President Clinton issued Executive Order 12898, which requires federal agencies to consider the effects of their actions on environmental justice communities. In subsequent years, the U.S. Department of Transportation and the Federal Highway Administration have issued their own orders on environmental justice. Our environmental assessment must comply with all of these orders. The orders provide that Federal Highway Administration take the appropriate and necessary steps to identify and address disproportionately high and adverse effects of federal projects on the health or environment of minority and low-income populations to the greatest extent practicable and permitted by law. This slide shows the steps we'll be using in developing our environmental justice analysis. It is based on guidance developed by Federal Highway Administration and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. As you can see, we begin by identifying minority and low-income or environmental justice populations and environmental justice communities. We engage in outreach with those communities, as you can see by the little picture on the right. We then determine whether the project would result in adverse effects on environmental justice populations or communities. We consider mitigations for those adverse effects of the project, as well as potentially offsetting benefits to the affected environmental justice populations. Again, there's outreach and engagement during that process. If the effects remain adverse after mitigation, we identify disproportionately high and adverse effects. If there are no disproportionately high and adverse effects, the evaluation is complete. If there are disproportionately high and adverse effects, we evaluate further mitigations or alternatives to avoid or reduce those effects. The Federal Highway Administration Environmental Justice Order provides specific definitions for minority and low-income populations. As you can see here, minority is defined by U.S. Department of Transportation and the Federal Highway Administration as a person who identifies as Black, Hispanic or Latino, Asian or Asian American, American Indian, Alaskan Native, Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander, or individuals identified as some other race by the U.S. Census. Low income is defined by United States Department of Transportation and Federal Highway Administration as a person whose household income is at or below the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services poverty guidelines. For a family of 4, the 2018 U.S. Census Bureau poverty threshold was $25,750 for the study area. Based on the definitions in the previous slide, we have identified the environmental justice populations in our 28 county study area. As noted earlier, and as you can see in this table, over 51% of our study area population is considered minority, and over 13% is considered low income. This map shows the distribution of environmental justice populations throughout our study area. The map shows large concentrations of environmental justice populations in New York City and the immediately surrounding suburbs. There are also large concentrations of environmental justice populations throughout our study area. Our public outreach will engage with these communities as much as possible. One way we'll be engaging with the communities is through the creation of an environmental justice technical advisory group. This is a group of technical experts who have knowledge of environmental justice considerations and can share concerns drawn from throughout the study area. The group is comprised of community leaders, advocacy group representatives, and industry group representatives with specific interest in environmental justice considerations. Their purpose will be to identify concerns and mitigation if needed, and help to ensure information is circulated as widely as possible to the larger communities. The technical advisory group will be by invitation only, and we anticipate the first meeting convening in early October of 2021. Potential participants will be contacted in advance. We will also be creating an environmental justice stakeholder working group. This is a group of interested members of the communities throughout the study area who would also like to participate beyond submitting comments or participating in the webinars. This group will be comprised of interested members of the community, and the purpose is to share concerns and request discussion on particular issues as appropriate. To suggest yourself or someone else, you may visit our website, or you may complete a form, or you can contact us by phone at 646-252-7440. We anticipate that the first meeting of this group will be convened in early November of 2021. And again, once we have all the names and contact information, participants will be contacted in advance. We're going to review some of the potential effects of the project. Importantly, these effects are dependent upon scenario. The next slide will highlight some of the potential benefits, but I'll take a few moments to talk through the bullets here. We anticipate that there may be effects where there would be new tolling infrastructure and equipment, that there might be changes in traffic in neighborhoods near the Manhattan Central Business District, and that there might be traffic that diverts around the Manhattan Central Business District to avoid tolls. Again, dependent upon scenario. Near the Queens Midtown Tunnel and the Hugh L. Carey Tunnel, we anticipate some traffic diversions on the highway system that could result in more than a nominal increase in traffic. Preliminary analysis suggests this change in traffic would not occur on local roadways and would not adversely impact air quality or noise in the neighborhoods where the highways are located. However, we will be looking more closely at the neighborhoods adjacent to both sides of these tunnels. Some drivers currently travel through Manhattan, although their destination is elsewhere. For example, you may travel from New Jersey to Brooklyn or the Bronx by going through Manhattan. Preliminary modeling indicates that some of these drivers may change their routes and traffic may increase in certain locations depending upon scenario. We will be looking more closely at the extent of those increases in parts of Staten Island, Brooklyn, Upper Manhattan, and the Bronx, and whether they could result in notable changes in traffic, air quality, or noise. Preliminary analysis also indicates that new transit passengers who may take transit rather than drive will be spread throughout the transit system and will not overcrowd any particular route or line. Based on preliminary analysis, the shift to transit would not notably change access to transit services, or pedestrian circulation near transit stations and hubs. In terms of tolls on low-income and minority populations coming to the Central Business District from throughout the region, a direct effect of the project on residents of the Manhattan Central Business District who are part of an environmental justice population is that they will be charged a toll to drive into the Central Business District. However, the MTA Reform and Traffic Mobility Act provides a tax credit for those individuals whose primary residence is within the Central Business District and whose New York adjusted gross income is less than $60,000 per year. Preliminary analysis has found that fewer than 1% of the Manhattan Central Business District's commuters are low-income individuals who drive, but nonetheless, we are assessing the economic effects of the additional costs for these customers. Tolls on the taxi or for hire vehicle industry, which has a high proportion of workers who identify as minority, as defined by United States Department of Transportation guidance, are also being looked at. Industry data shows that a high percentage of taxi or for hire vehicle drivers identify as belonging to a minority population. Once there is a new toll for entering the Manhattan Central Business District, some passengers may no longer choose to use taxis and for hire vehicles. We will examine the effect of the project on the taxi or for hire vehicle industry and the resultant effect on minority drivers. With respect to potential project benefits, if approved, we anticipate the project would reduce vehicular traffic in and near the Manhattan Central Business District. Overall, and depending upon scenario, our models predict a 15 to 20% reduction in traffic volumes that would enter the Manhattan Central Business District each day. As a result, we would see improvements in air quality and traffic noise as there would be fewer vehicles. We also anticipate improvements in travel times within the Manhattan Central Business District, again, as there would be less congestion. And of course, the project would provide additional funds for subways, trains, and buses, funding the MTA Capital Program, which includes many projects to improve and expand subway, bus, and commuter rail service. This would benefit MTA's transit commuters, including environmental justice populations. I want to take just a moment to discuss or describe the anticipated NEPA schedule. We've already begun our outreach. That's what we're doing here today. And we anticipate that this outreach will continue through January of 2022, as we also prepare the NEPA environmental assessment. Between February 2022 and May 2022, there will be review with Federal Highway Administration of the document itself. And at the end of that period, the environmental assessment will be made available for public comment. Once the document is made available for public comment, there will be a public review period and a new comment period. That period will also include additional outreach related to toll rate ranges. Between that June 2022 date and December 2022, the work will be done to incorporate all of that information to make sure that the final outreach is done, and ultimately to have Federal Highway Administration make an environmental determination. If approved by Federal Highway Administration, future outreach and public hearings will be held as part of the Implementation and Traffic Mobility Review Board process during 2023. Here is the list of all the public outreach webinars we are holding. As had been noted in the distribution materials prior, you may attend any one of these or all of these as you would like. We also have the 3 environmental justice outreach meetings, webinars. Those will be occurring on October 7th, 12th, and 13th with slightly different focus areas. But again, as with the public outreach meetings, residents may attend any one of the webinars they would like to. In terms of our stakeholder working group meetings, we expect the first one in early November, the second one in late November, and then we expect a third one in June of 2022 once the environmental assessment has been released for public review. Thank you.
We will now move to the public comment portion of today's webinar. We encourage anyone joining via Zoom or live stream to take a short survey using the QR code or link currently being displayed. The link can also be found in the Q&A section of the Zoom. We are gathering public comments today to inform the environmental review process. Comments will be reflected in the environmental assessment once it is made public. Rather than responding to comments as they are given, we'll do our best to address specific questions whenever possible in the Q&A chat function. However, please understand that at this phase of the process, your question may be one that cannot be answered meaningfully until completion of the modeling and analysis. Anyone who joined the Zoom may also use the Q&A function throughout today's webinar to ask questions or provide comments. Please note that each speaker is limited to 2 minutes. We ask that speakers keep their remarks to the 2-minute time frame out of respect for all other speakers. We will be calling speakers who live in the geographic area that is the focus of today's webinar first, in the order they signed up, but everyone who signed up will be called to speak today. If you join the Zoom under a name that is different from the one you used when you signed up to speak, please identify yourself in the Q&A function with the name you used when you signed up. When you're called on to speak, there will be a brief transition on your screen. Please make sure that once your screen updates, your camera and microphone are enabled before beginning your remarks. You will not be able to unmute or enable your camera until it is your turn to speak. Please remain patient until then. In the event you miss your name being called, we'll call the list one more time after all speakers in attendance have been called a first time. As a reminder, this webinar is being live casted and recorded and will be available publicly on our YouTube channel and our project website. By attending this virtual webinar, you are consenting to be recorded. We will now begin the public comment portion of today's webinar. The first speaker is Assemblymember Ken Zebrowski, followed by Walter Zuling. Assemblymember?
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Good evening, my name is Ken Zebrowski. I represent the 96th District in New York State Assembly in Rockland County. I testify tonight in defense of Rockland and the west of the Hudson commuters in general. Despite being in the MTA district and paying all the same taxes as our neighbors on the east side of the Hudson River, our commuting options pale in comparison. Our trains are run by New Jersey Transit, who consistently has substandard service, and we have no one-seat ride into Manhattan. The train option is oftentimes a long train ride on a single track down into New Jersey, only to have to find another method over the river. Thus, many Rocklanders, especially those traveling off-peak, are forced to drive into the city. While considering this congestion pricing scheme, you may legitimately be able to ask constituents in Westchester or Long Island that they can take the train to avoid the toll. You can't tell my commuters that. The unacceptable message to west of the Hudson commuters is you must shoulder the full burden of this toll. Commuters coming from New Jersey through the tunnels will see an offset. Commuters coming from Rockland using the GW Bridge will not. That's patently unfair. Secondly, this entire process amazes me. Article after article is written about how COVID-19 may have fundamentally changed our economy, how businesses are moving to remote work options, how commercial real estate may be going through a dramatic shift, how New York City attractions are worried that visitors may not return. Yet, we think that congestion pricing cash grab is immune from these shifts. If anything, an additional $23 toll is all the more reason to stay away. By the time my folks pay the GW toll and congestion pricing toll and the outrageous parking fees, they have spent close to $100 before having the privilege of spending money in New York City business. If I was one of those businesses, I'd be looking at this plan as one more barrier to rebuilding the city post-COVID, and it would scare me to death. Instead, we should be recognizing and fostering our symbiotic relationship in the metro area. We in the suburbs benefit from New York City, and New York City benefits from us. At this time of great economic uncertainty, punishing suburban residents for the privilege of participating in the New York City economy is unsound policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Walter Zuling, followed by Senator Elijah Reichlin-Melnick. Walter? Walter, if you're able to unmute yourself, you may begin your remarks.
Oh, sorry about that. Good evening. My name is Walter Zulig. I'm speaking as a member of the Metro North Railroad Commuter Council and as a longtime Westchester resident who travels regularly on Metro North. Traffic congestion is a very serious problem in Manhattan and beyond. Heavy air pollution, reduced quality of life, and extensive delays can all be mitigated through congestion pricing. It's only fair to require drivers to bear more of the cost of our streets to make our region healthier, safer, and better for everyone. Congestion pricing will help us avoid a grim reality for the future of MTA. Federal emergency funding will dry up sooner than we are prepared for. And without a long-term strategy like congestion pricing, everyday subway, bus, and commuter rail riders will take the hit. The $1 billion bonded to $15 billion brought in annually by congestion pricing are more than just crucial. They will be the lifeblood of the entire New York City metropolitan area. With congestion pricing, Metro North can become the best option for even more Westchester and other Hudson Valley residents. Projects like repairing and making more stations ADA accessible, extending Metro North to Penn Station and adding 4 more stations in the Bronx, making the critical track signal and power upgrades along the Harlem, Hudson, and New Haven lines, as well as the west of Hudson service, will ensure that our communities have safe, reliable, and efficient service. Public transit is already the most environmentally friendly form of transportation, and we have to make sure that we're prepared to face worsening climate change and extreme weather by funding critical infrastructure improvements in the region. Congestion pricing with few exemptions is the only feasible way to raise funding for essential improvements to Metro North. Thanks to congestion pricing, the transit system we desperately need is in sight. And to my fellow Westchester residents, I say, take Metro North the next time you go down to the city. You'll have a more relaxing trip while helping to make our entire region stronger than ever. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Senator Elijah Reichlin-Melnick, followed by Assembly Member Amy Paulin.
Good evening, and thanks for taking the time to listen to feedback about congestion pricing. I have 2 points that I want to make tonight. First of all, the concept of congestion pricing is reasonable, and if it's implemented fairly, it could bring benefits. By raising the cost of driving into lower Manhattan, it could discourage unnecessary car trips and reduce pollution, helping lower our state's carbon emissions. By providing a new stream of revenue for the MTA, it could help rebuild and expand our mass transit system. However, for my constituents in Rockland County, congestion pricing will be a raw deal if changes aren't made. Rockland County residents lack access to convenient and fast mass transit options. Particularly, we have no one-seat ride to New York City, in contrast to my constituents in Westchester and hundreds of thousands of commuters in New Jersey and Long Island. Yet Rockland's businesses pay the MTA payroll tax, and our residents pay an extra 0.375% sales tax on all of our purchases to help fund the MTA. Meanwhile, the value of the services actually provided to Rockland's commuters have consistently been far below the cost of the taxes that Rockland pays into the MTA system. Many estimates have continually put that value gap between what Rockland pays and what we get to be approximately $40 million. So when congestion pricing goes into effect, those who live in northern New Jersey who can't afford the fees will switch to taking NJ Transit to Penn Station. Those living on Long Island will take the LIRR directly to Grand Central, and riders from Westchester, Putnam, Dutchess, and even Fairfield County, Connecticut can take a one-seat ride directly into New York City via the Metro North. What will Rockland have? Still a $40 million value deficit, with tens of millions of additional fees to pay, since our residents can't catch a direct train into the city and must pay $12 to $16 just to enter Manhattan via the George Washington Bridge or other crossings. This is completely unfair. When this program is implemented, it must be done equitably based on access to public transportation. Until a one-seat ride into Manhattan is available for Rockland County, it's imperative that Rockland residents are credited for the cost of tolls already paid to enter Manhattan. Otherwise, commuters will face literally thousands of dollars a year in additional costs with
Please
no
conclude
viable
your
options
remarks.
for mass transit as an alternative.
Thank you. The next speaker is Assemblymember Amy Paulin, followed by Daniel Convisor. Assemblymember? Assemblymember?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. I'm Assemblymember Amy Paulin. As Corporations Authorities and Commissions Chair, I served as a member of the Metropolitan Transportation Sustainability Advisory Work Group. We were charged with assessing the problems and coming up with solutions to the dire straits of the MTA system. The amount of work necessary to repair and improve the subways and commuter rails is enormous. And we quickly realized we needed the creation of a stable funding source. Faced with this reality, the work group made the difficult decision to recommend central business district tolling, which will provide $15 billion for capital improvements to the MTA system. All residents of the MTA region benefit from a robust and reliable transit system. Residents within the central business district will especially benefit from reduction in harmful emissions when there are fewer cars on the road. Every discount, credit, or exemption granted takes away from this goal and means one less project can be completed. They should be granted very sparingly, if at all. Metro North has a long list of projects that are needed to maintain and improve service to our communities, including new rolling stock, a third track for the Harlem line, ADA accessibility, Penn Station access project, one-seat ride for Rockland. We must do everything we can to ensure that the full amount of funding from Central Business District tolling is realized so these critical projects can move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Daniel Convisor, followed by Melissa Kaplan-Macy.
Okay.
Daniel, you may begin your remarks.
Great. Hello. My name is Daniel Convisor. I'm the director of Bike Tarrytown. We're an advocacy organization to promote the economy and health of the two villages of Tarrytown and Sleepy Hollow. by improving transportation options. So we are in strong favor of the congestion pricing program, and we wish it would start way sooner. But of course, that's not directly under the MTA's control. I hope our federal delegation can help move this along faster somehow. The funds are much needed for MTA improvements and mobility improvements, and it would be great if some of these funds could be used to improve direct bus service and get bus lanes on highways for our constituents or friends in Rockland County, so they can get a fast one-seat ride to the city. And as Assemblymember Paulin pointed out, it is important not to have exemptions and credits. It defeats the purpose. We really need to have a strong, robust, expensive program for people driving, because driving exacts huge costs on our region, for the people living in it, for the businesses living in it. All the delays and pollution is a huge harm for everybody in the region, especially folks living right next to the CBD. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Melissa Kaplan-Macy, followed by Daniel Herbst.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you. Good evening. My name is Melissa Kaplan-Macy, and I'm Vice President for State Programs for the Regional Plan Association, a nearly 100-year-old civic organization working for mobility, economic opportunity, affordable housing, and a more resilient New York City metropolitan region. And I'm also a resident of Westchester County. For decades, we have strongly supported congestion pricing because we think it is a centerpiece of a set of policies that will lead to a greener, more equitable region. Done right, congestion pricing reduces driver delays, improves transit, and reduces air pollution both in and out of the charging zone. Congestion pricing will raise vital revenue for public transit, and 100% of this net revenue will go into paying for improvements to our public transportation system. Most Westchester County commuters to Manhattan ride transit. Less than 3% drive to work in the congestion pricing zone. Westchester County residents will benefit from better transit and reduced traffic when they go into Manhattan below 60th Street. Congestion pricing will reduce traffic congestion. Traffic congestion causes crashes and injuries, air pollution, and hurts our economic recovery. We need tools to manage it, especially since traffic is already surpassing pre-COVID levels. For Westchester residents driving into Manhattan, our estimates show that congestion pricing will mean a 10 to 15% increase in traffic speeds during busy periods. Congestion pricing will make the transportation system more equitable. This will benefit lower income households who don't own a car and rely on transit because owning a car is expensive. Regional Plan Association produced a thorough report in 2019 that analyzed a number of toll scenarios and laid out recommendations for implementation. It is available for all to read on our website at rpa.org. Key recommendations from the report are as follows. Implement transit and bicycle improvements prior to starting congestion pricing. Adopt specific objectives and metrics to meet traffic, environmental, and health goals and ensure that benefits are equally shared. And I'll skip the rest, but thank you so much for the 2 minutes and for your time tonight.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Daniel Herbst, followed by Brendan Heaney. Daniel Herbst.
Here I am.
We can hear you.
Can you hear me?
You can begin your remarks. Daniel, I believe you're muted now.
Oh, I'm sorry. I certainly am. Good evening. My name is Daniel Herbst. I'm a Westchester resident. I've been an avid motorcyclist for 30 years. And I think that two-wheeled vehicles can go a long way toward promoting the stated purpose of congestion pricing. That stated goal is to improve the transit system and reduce congestion. It doesn't take into account, however, the fact that granting fuel-efficient, congestion-reducing vehicles such as motorcycles and scooters, anything less than 100% exemption would run counter that stated objective. Motorcyclists should get an exemption from congestion pricing, and here's why. They're incrementally better than cars we're trying to restrict with the high toll. They take up far less space than regular cars, especially SUVs that dominate our roads and cause a disproportionate amount of carnage as well. The wheelbase, for example, of a Chevy Suburban is almost 11 feet, while the wheelbase of my motorcycle is 5 feet. Additionally, it's legal in New York State for motorcycles to ride two abreast. So again, that reduces congestion. So in short, you can get 8 motorcycles or other two-wheel vehicles into the space of one SUV. So for me, coming into the city by motorcycle is convenient and economic, and the footprint is small. So I think the use of all two-wheel
Please
vehicles.
conclude your remarks. Thank you. Our next speaker is Brendan Heaney, followed by Jeremy Vargas.
Is everything working all right?
Yes, we can hear you.
So I'm Brendan Heaney. I've lived in Bronxville my entire life, and I take the train to school, and I'm here to support congestion pricing. So New York City has given up so much for us, and we've given up nothing for them. Every year, restaurants lose out on billions of dollars in revenue because of road space given to Westchester cars instead of them. New York City spends millions of dollars on maintaining roads that we damage. Dozens of people die, especially children in lower income areas, because we have to take our dangerous cars into New York City. So, and this isn't even mentioning pollution, which undoubtedly harms millions of lives every year. So now even if you just want to focus on Westchester, then this is still the best plan. Even if transit isn't as good as it could be, that's even more reason to support this. The 10% of the funds that will go to Metro North could send Hudson Line trains into Penn Station. It could bring back Tappan Zee commuter rail ideas. It could give Rockland County a one-seat trip to Manhattan. So then I'd also like to say that we shouldn't even be holding these meetings. We're spending years in bureaucracy, environmentally review studies for a project that we know is good for the environment. If this was happening in Europe, the moment they decided to have congestion pricing, they would have started work on it, and it would have been implemented by the end of the year. These meetings being held is a policy failure, although I do support the idea of congestion pricing. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jeremy Vargas, followed by Brian Howell. Jeremy?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, my name is Jeremy. I live in Yonkers, and I'm commenting today in support of congestion pricing. Until recently, I was commuting into Manhattan every day via Metro North or via subway and bus, and even to this day, when I do need to enter New York City, it's always through transit. Even here in our region, we need to be supporting transit and reducing car use as much as possible. And as other speakers have mentioned, we need to keep exemptions to a minimum because not only does it undermine the project, that small amount that maybe you will need to drive is then forced to pay more. So the equitable thing to do overall is to make sure this passes with minimal exemptions. So once again, once again, we need congestion pricing. We need it ASAP. Any electeds from Westchester, Rockland, or other areas who may be listening, I hope this is an encouragement in our regions to improve the bus connections and other car reduction strategies locally as well to tie the regions together stronger. So let's get it done. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Brian Howell, followed by Christopher Hayward.
Good evening. My name is Brian Howell. I speak in support of a congestion pricing program with no exemptions. Much has been made of the cost those who choose to drive into the city will have to pay, but little attention is given to the cost of the free-for-all that now exists on our streets. Costs we all pay, when not with money, with our time, our anger, our health, and sometimes even with our lives. I grew up next to an 8-lane highway. It's no surprise that I was diagnosed with asthma, a condition I still have. When the company I worked for went out of business, I lost my health insurance, and the cost of my asthma medication was $4,161.96 a year. Over $4,000 a year because people could drive 50 feet from my childhood home. In 2016, that cost was 6,753 asthma hospitalizations of New York City children. Last month, the cost of 25 lives across the metro region lost to Hurricane Ida, a storm exacerbated by climate change, a threat whose key contributor is transportation emissions, largely from cars and trucks. Because so much of our built environment is given over to cars, rainwater cannot be easily absorbed into the ground. The cost? Thousands of homes flooded last month, but many more in the decades to come as extreme weather events like Ida become more frequent. In 2018, 205 New Yorkers were killed in traffic crashes. In 2019, that number rose to 220. Last year, the cost and lives of unfettered driving was 243 New Yorkers. And through September 14th of this year, that number is already up another 26%. The cost? More parents who will never come home, more babies killed on sidewalks, more teachers who will never again inspire their students. Many have asked for exemptions, but I asked them to consider the costs we New Yorkers pay every day because congestion pricing doesn't exist yet. The costs we pay in illnesses like asthma, the costs we pay in noise, the costs we pay in a warming, more extreme and more destructive climate, and more than anything, the costs we pay with our lives. I asked the MTA to have the courage to create a congestion pricing program with no exemptions, to act in the best interest of us all, even when our wisdom and empathy fail us. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Christopher Hayward, followed by Charlton D'Souza.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Chris Hayward. I live in Brooklyn and work in the CBD. In other meetings, I have commented on the various benefits that congestion pricing would provide in terms of making our streets safer, reducing emissions of greenhouse gases and other pollutants, and alleviating the incessant honking and vehicle noise from which those of us who work or live in the CBD suffer. I will not rehash those points tonight. I have also described how the proposed toll charges are much too low and that they do not reflect the true cost of congestion due to externalities, which has been estimated to be greater than $100 per trip. A significant component of this true cost is the monetary value of the delays that congestion causes for all other road users. Given this, if I were a hypothetical resident of a suburb of New York City or beyond who had no other option than to drive into the CBD, I would still support congestion pricing because of the following reasons. A congestion toll will inevitably cause some individuals to choose alternate options to travel into Manhattan, thereby reducing the overall congestion, as is of course the goal of the program. Consequently, my commute time would be lessened. If I made slightly above the minimum income threshold above which one would be subject to congestion pricing, $60,000, my effective hourly wage would be roughly $30 per hour. Thus, if a congestion pricing charge of, say, $10 shaved more than 20 minutes off my total round-trip commute time, it would be financially worthwhile in terms of the monetary value of my time. We all trade time for money and pay money to save time, and congestion pricing is, in this sense, no different than hiring someone to cut one's lawn or to paint one's house, for example. Of course, this calculation ignores the very real psychological pain caused by sitting in traffic day in and day out. Based on real-world examples such as London and economist models, the time savings for a typical commuter who drives into the CBD from a suburb will be greater than 20 minutes, and many of these individuals have effective hourly wages well in excess of $30 per hour. For such individuals, including many people listening tonight, supporting congestion pricing should be a no-brainer.
Please conclude your remarks.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Charlton D'Souza, followed by Aaron Bloom. Charlton? The next speaker will be Aaron Bloom, followed by Alana Wilson. Aaron? Aaron, if you unmute yourself, you can
Yes.
begin your remarks.
Yes, I'm so sorry for the delay in that. Thank you for letting me take the time to speak. I have lived in New York most of my life. I have been a motorcyclist for 27 years, and I would like to speak on behalf of exemptions for motorcyclists and scooters. Every major city in the world that adopted congestion pricing has an exemption for motorcycles. They have done this based on research and statistics. Why? They recognize that motorcycles take up a fraction of the space that cars, and certainly much less than SUVs and trucks do, both while they are in motion and when they are parked. In motion, you can almost think about motorcycles like fish swimming. They're much more adaptable. And parked, you can park 10 motorcycles for every SUV that parks. Simply put, motorcycles solve the problem of congestion. Likewise, motorcycles and scooters get excellent mileage. If your concern is environmental justice, then you should support them. They weigh less, they create much less wear and tear on the roads. And motorcyclists are both licensed and insured. They are the only two-wheeled vehicles actually riding anywhere that have both of those qualities going on. Finally, with regard to the idea of vision zero, while motorcyclists pose some danger to themselves, the number of other people killed by motorcyclists is in the single digits in the entire state of New York annually, year in, year out. So motorcycles are the solution, and I ask for an exemption for them for all of these reasons. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. The next speaker is Alana Wilson, followed by Charlton D'Souza.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. My name is Elena Wilson. I live in Brooklyn. We need this ASAP, and we need it to work by minimizing exemptions. Motor vehicles don't just make Manhattan hostile for pedestrians, bicycle riders, and motorists themselves. They also make it deadly, and that doesn't have to be our reality. Every day, MTA and other bus riders are mired in traffic. Those riders include many low-income and essential workers who deserve world-class bus service, but that's incompatible with current volumes of traffic. Subway riders deserve accessible stations with elevators. So please, 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 move this forward intact and as quickly as possible. In terms of Rockland County, the Rockland County website lists 5 companies that provide direct one-seat service to Manhattan, and I share the broad interest expressed by others here in expanding that service and improving it. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Charlton D'Souza, followed by Kendra Hems. Charlton? Charlton, you may unmute yourself and begin your remarks.
Can you hear me?
Now we can hear you.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm the president of Passengers United. Good evening. And I am in support of congestion pricing. I feel we need congestion pricing in New York City. So we need the 7 train extended to New Jersey. The MTA should control the Nassau County bus. And I feel that the PAT train should be free. Yellow cab should get an exemption of tolls. And I also feel that the MTA should provide 25% of funding from congestion pricing to New Jersey and Connecticut. It's only fair because we're asking other states to pay for our problems. And I also feel that the Nassau County buses should be taken over again by the MTA. And I also feel that, we need more infrastructure. As far as these meetings are concerned, I feel that a lot of people cannot find where these meetings are on the website, and a lot of people don't even know about these meetings. So I feel that these meetings should be in public and that it should be extended, and this congestion pricing process should be taken very slowly so that there's no litigation from New Jersey, Connecticut, or any of the other states. I feel it's not fair that a lot of people are being asked to pay $39 to enter New York City. But at the same time, I support congestion pricing because it's going to relieve a lot of the pollution in our air. It's going to make our city better. And it's actually going to provide a lot of funding for mass transit. However, like the chairman of the MTA said, this has to be done right. And it has to be a very slow process so that there's no litigation and no one feels that their voices was not heard. So in closing, Passengers United supports congestion pricing. And again, I want to say thank you for letting me speak today.
Thank you. The final 2 speakers are Kendra Hems and Arthur Kramer. If you are signed up to speak but have not heard your name called, please indicate this in the Q&A function. The next speaker is Kendra Hems.
Good evening. My name is Kendra Hems, and I am president of the Trucking Association of New York. As a trucking industry, we share concerns about the impacts of congestion. In an annual survey of trucking companies and drivers from across the nation, the impact of congestion consistently ranks among the top 10 critical issues. While congestion impacts all users, the trucking industry is uniquely impacted. It increases motor carrier operating costs through wasted fuel, increased labor costs, vehicle wear and tear, and puts additional stress on professional drivers as available on-duty and driver hours are spent sitting in traffic. Studies on congestion calculates annual congestion costs of the trucking industry to be over $63 billion. And in this region specifically, congestion costs equate to $630,000 per mile to the trucking industry. So while we agree that congestion must be addressed, we do have some serious concerns about the proposed central business district tolling program. First and foremost, we cannot continue to look at trucks as a root cause of congestion, as this is simply not the case. Trucks are entering the proposed tolling zone because they have to, delivering food, fuel, building supplies, medical supplies, and pharmaceuticals, including the life-saving COVID vaccine. Trucks may be a symptom of the congestion issue, but they are not the cause. So a couple of our primary concerns, the Traffic Mobility Review Board was supposed to make recommendations for a variable pricing structure. To our knowledge, members of that board have never been named. There's been no notice or discussion, making it difficult to determine true impact of the proposal. We're concerned that the toll collections must ensure annual revenues legislated at $15 billion. If the program is truly successful in reducing congestion, it becomes a declining source of revenue, and we're concerned about future toll increases. We don't know how the toll will be charged. Every time people are listeners today, there are so many questions, and we have concerns about the overall impact to the industry. As I said, we understand the need to address congestion, but we want to ensure that it's done in a fair and equitable manner for the trucking industry. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Arthur Kramer, followed by Catherine Schwartz. Arthur?
Yes, I'm sorry, I'm getting the small screen. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. Arthur Jerry Kremer, I'm a former state assemblyman and chair of the Ways and Means Committee. I am representing the Hunts Point Cooperative Market. We send approximately 600 vehicles a day to New York City. We have 4,000 employees in the Hunts Point Market, and it is the largest food market in the world. The trucks are different ones that go to the city. The smaller vendors will have to make multiple trips to the city. The larger vendors can make the minimum required in order to get their products in. We serve the bodegas, the delis, every conceivable restaurant you can imagine in the 5 boroughs plus the suburban regions. The problem we face is that these costs are going to be passed on to the consumer if we can afford to do it. The smaller vendors may be forced out of business. We are a tenant of the city of New York and pay rent to the city. The Hunts Point Market also, in addition to the cooperative market, which is meat and provisions, there's also a produce market and a fish market. If there's no special arrangement made for the Hunts Point Market, which is the only city market in the region, there's a good likelihood that a number of our smaller members will go out of business because they won't be able to pass the costs on to their buyers. This is a crisis for the market. We were the largest market in the world. I want to assure you that without special consideration being made of the market, this will be an economic tornado for the members of the market. We're asking you that you recognize that the Hunts Point Market is an exceptional case and that the MTA and the panel should consider what its needs are and try to come up with a solution that will keep this market in business. Thank you for giving me your time.
Thank you. Our final speaker is Kathy Schwartz. Kathy?
Yes, okay. I think I'm here. Okay. I'm a resident of Rockland County, the second fastest growing county in New York State. I am also an environmentalist and recognize that cars are the biggest contributor of greenhouse gases in the US, in New York State, and in Rockland. Some people who commute into New York City from Rockland do attempt to take public transit. If they live close enough to the new Hudson Link buses, they take that service across the Cuomo Bridge, hook up with a Metro North train, and go into Grand Central. They are the lucky ones. Anyone who wants to go to the west side and lives near the one train line can do so and transfer in Hoboken to the PATH train to the World Trade Center. There are also 8 bus routes that go into Port Authority, but they are extremely poor. And I won't go into the detail because I don't have time, but they were eliminated during COVID. They're coming back on a very limited basis. I'm a big advocate for public transit, but in my perspective, in a suburb that is underserved by public transit, it will be extremely difficult to get people out of their cars and onto public transit. Rockland County gets a quarter of a voice in the MTA board. And I think that needs to be looked at again so we can get some funding for public transit in Rockland. I believe in the subways, the Metro North trains, they should get their share, but we should get some share more in Rockland County as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining us this evening. For those who did not do so already, we encourage you to take our short survey via the QR code or link currently being displayed. The link can also be found in the Q&A section of the Zoom. For details about upcoming webinars and how to sign up to speak at them, please visit new.mta.info/project/CBDTP or by calling the public meeting hotline at 646-252-6262. 6777. As a final reminder, in addition to the virtual public webinars, there are several other ways you can provide comments, ask questions, or make requests. We encourage the public to comment via the CBDTP website, new.mta.info/project/CBDTP. You may also email comments to cbdtp@mtabt.org. Send them via mail to CBD Tolling Program, 2 Broadway, 23rd floor, New York, New York 10004, or call 646-252-7440. The time is currently 7:06 p.m. This concludes our webinar. Thank you again for your participation.